Now, what we did initially is that we started getting into a major public interface of the government. The literacy rate has gone up by almost 30% compared to that what we were during the pre-independence era, when it is being told with a greater amount of example, evidence and simplicity. That's the reason how a citizen's charter would definitely become successful. Good morning and welcome to the first session, Chapter 3, Unit 2, 4th semester BCom, Good Governance in India, where we are going to talk about Citizens' Charter. Now, the Indian scenario, when you start looking about the Citizens' Charter, we have been seeing that over the period of last 15-20 years, what has been a substantial increase that we are talking about is the literacy percentage. The literacy rate has gone up by almost 30% compared to that what we were during the pre-independence era. We were somewhere around at 50%, then we moved on to 60, 70, 80. Today we are talking about alarmingly about 89 to 90% of India's population which is on the literacy mode, which means everybody are becoming increasingly aware of their rights. Citizens have become more articulate about the administration, not just from the headlines, but they also know what is exactly happening with each and every department as we are speaking on. Now, what is the most important part of a citizen's charter is that it is actually trying to get into a transparent mode with the working of the government. So since we started analyzing about the government and how they are functioning, a conference of chief ministers from various states and union territories took place in May 1997 in New Delhi, presided by the Prime Minister of India, and an action plan for effective and responsive government at the center and state level was adopted. Now, if you look at the concept of Citizens' Charter, it is more about a participative government where the citizens want to get involved at the transaction, at the conceptual, and also at the implementation level. Today, when you talk about any services that are being provided by the government, the citizen wants to know how exactly that service is being implemented, how it is being given to the people, what are all the pros and cons of that particular app or the service that is being provided. So the necessity for government to include its citizen, make them understand, make them aware about each and every activity has become mandatory. So after this conference, which took place in May 1997, this became a compulsory process through which we drew the Citizens' Charter Act. Followed by which, one of the major decisions that came out of the conference was the central and state governments would formulate a citizens' charter. A charter, which means to say that it is going to be an official document which is going to be signed, sanctioned by the highest level of authority, and that is going to have a large public interface, which means to say that now the government is going to get exposed to the public. So everybody is going to become a part of the application. Now, starting with departments like railways, telecom, post, public distribution, and many other departments, the charter became a public tract. Now, moving forward, the standards of service as well as the time limits that the public can reasonably expect for the service delivery, avenues of grievance redressal, and the provisions were also made public. Now, for example, today when we talk about IRCTC, our well-known app for the railway ticket booking, moment you book the ticket, you get an acknowledgement receipt in the form of a message stating that your ticket booking is confirmed with the seat number, the coach, the compartment, and other details. Now, that's exactly where you start seeing a responsive action taken by the government, especially by the Ministry of Railways, where they want to keep their passengers, their customers informed about each and every transaction that is being done through their app, which means to say that I'm going to involve the public who are going to use my application, make them aware about the process, make them inform about how a transaction happens, how a ticket is booked, how a ticket is cancelled, if there is going to be a refund, if there is going to be a change in time. Every single piece of information will be available to you at the right time, at the right place, so that the public knows exactly how things are moving forward in terms of the application. That's exactly what you see, that the citizen involvement and the consumer groups coming into picture. Followed by which you will also see that the Department of Administrative Reforms and Grievances in the Government of India, the short form is DARPG, initiated the task of coordinating, formulating, operationalization of the citizens' charters altogether. Now, when I talk about the operation part of it, there were guidelines that were well defined and listed, talking about the do's and don'ts of the community, which was translated and which was circulated among the public. Moment you draw a charter, it is also necessary for you here to make the public understand about the pros and cons, the do's and don'ts. So what is very important in a citizen's charter is the communication aspect at the beginning. You need to make it very clear to all the citizens of the country what is the purpose of the app. Why are you developing an app of that nature? What can the app do in terms of its activity? So what we are trying to bring in is bring out a very focused and effective charters for the formulation. The government agencies as well as the center and state were advised to constitute a task force for the representation of the users, starting from the senior management and the cutting edge staff altogether. So what are we actually trying to talk about here is that we are trying to involve every level of hierarchy in the government towards bringing in a transparent, efficient and a responsible government that will be able to handle the queries of the customers at any given point of time. So the aim of a citizen's charter is to present the government in the most transparent and accessible form so that everybody comes to know what is happening behind the screen. Now, moving forward, the Indian scenario continues to make us understand about the vision mission statement, the details of the business transacted, details of the client, services provided, the grievance redressal, and the expectations from the client. So look at it. It's a very clear charter. It's a very clear statement trying to put across what are the needs, what are the requirements, beginning from the vision mission statement to that of the transaction details, clients, services, grievances, and finally talking about the expectations of the clients. Followed by, let's get into the exemplary implementations of the Citizens Charter. Now, what we did initially is that we started getting into a major public interface of the government where we started talking about establishing a new phase of democracy, and that is getting away from the bureaucracy model. We also created a role model that can be replicated in other sectors and area. The banking sector was identified for the purpose in keeping in view about the economic reforms that are being taking place, and plus also we added up an exemplary customer service so that this application becomes true. Now let me put you in a very simple term here. Moment you get into any of the customer service oriented application or an app altogether, let's say, let's take an e-banking app itself today. The most interesting thing is that they are trying to make you aware about each and every product that is available, that is being offered by the bank for the usage purpose. Now, let's say that I want to start and fix a deposit online. I want to apply for a housing loan, for an education loan or a vehicle loan, or I want to go in terms of starting up a PPF account. What happens here is that the awareness that has to be circulated among the employees, customers, and the different beneficiaries is the most challenging task of going forward in terms of becoming transparent. So when you look into the banking sector for a while, this is a sector which has taken a great amount of change in terms of educating its customers, clients, and its employees in terms of making people understand why a particular product is offered, what are the terms and conditions, what are the risk factors involved, and how that product will be actually impacting your daily life. So that's exactly what we want to see here, is that when you want to go public, you need to be ready to take all the pressure, challenges that are being faced on you. Why? Because whenever you are going to go public, the people are not going to keep quiet by what you are offering. Rather, they will come back and ask you the question why this particular product is being offered at this rate of interest, at this terms and condition. So that's exactly why we are looking here, is that the amount of education, the amount of activity that is involved in making you enlighten about the system, about the product, about the innovation, the quality, the drive, that is where we start looking into the Citizens Charter. The Citizens Charter becomes more effective, more purposeful when it is being explained all the more clearly, when it is being told with a greater amount of example, evidence, and simplicity. That's the reason how a Citizens Charter would definitely become successful. Now, moving further, the primary objective of this exercise was to build banking sector as a model of excellence implementation of Citizens Charter. Now, one side, when you look into the banking sector, though that's a very sensitive sector. Why? Because you are going to talk about customers' asset, both in form of cash and as well as another form of securities. But nevertheless, banking has always been a key sector that has been doing a great amount of impact towards the economy of a country, especially like India. So why did we take the banking sector? Because we wanted the customer to first know about his own account. Many people in India still have a confusion. What do you mean by savings account, current account, or some other kinds of account that we have been talking about? But nevertheless, the banks have always taken that step forward in terms of making their customers getting aware, getting them understand on the page that, this is your savings account, this is your current account, this is what we mean by an overdraft and other facilities. So all the while, what banks have been doing is that trying to enlighten the customer, trying to come forward in the public, make them get involved in the day-to-day transaction, make them believe that yes, transactions can happen online, they are secure, they are safe, they are trustable in nature, and that's why they became a center of excellence. Because when you follow a process, when you create a process, and when you try to exemplify it, when you try to make it to reach its peak, its epitome altogether, that requires 100% trust. That requires 100% reliability in terms of performance. So every time when the customer gets that confident, yes, my bank stands with me for all purpose, for all reasons at any given point of time, that's where a model becomes a model of excellence. Now, you are not just going to give examples, but you are going to become an example there in the society. That's where I always say the Citizens Charter became a very, very successful venture. So banks like Punjab and Sindh Bank, or when you talk about Punjab National Bank, or when you talk about Oriental Bank of Commerce, all these banks were selected for the hand-holding exercise which was happening during the time period of 2000, and following which the Citizens Charters were also discussed and implemented. Now, the stakeholder involvement is very, very important. Deployment of Citizens Charter at all levels with the staff, especially employees at the cutting edge level. Creation of awareness about the charter. Specialized training that was given to the employees to make them understand about the concept. Now, in India, the basic level of making a citizen getting aware about how things are happening has to start at the home level, at the home ground. It's always a proverb in English that I need to tell here, where we say that it's in a very, very simple way. Charity begins at home. So similarly, knowledge begins at your base. First of all, the bank has to make their employees understand the products and the solutions that they are giving so that they will be able to enlighten the customers in the long run. Followed by which we are going to talk about the evaluation. The evaluation was carried out by the DARPG, Department Consumer Coordination, and an NGO in 1998. The results were quite encouraging, giving a very nascent stage of this initiative. A brief questionnaire was formed, so we were able to understand the customer is interested in this kind of an activity. Plus, it is able to help them in an in-house evaluation to find out, yes, the customer wants to be a part of this process. Now, every time the government of India initially started thinking that will this be a success? Will the customer come out of his shell and try to understand the process of accessibility, transformation that's going on? But nevertheless, Indians have always accepted change. They always felt that this is the right time for us to move forward with the digital pace and technology going forward. Now, with that, we also, in the year 2003 and 2002, we started talking about a professionalized agency that came with a standardized model for internal, external evaluation. This agency also carried out evaluation of implementation of the charters in 5 central government organizations, 15 departmental organizations. They started suggesting method of increasing the awareness altogether among the organization as well as externally to the people, which was one of the most important methods of orientation. The major findings of the evaluation was carried out, and it was stated in the report that was majority of cases were not formulated through consultative. By and large, service providers are not familiar with the philosophy and goals. When one of the departments evaluated, they had adequate publicity had been given, but in most of the department, charters were only in the early stage. No funds were specifically earmarked for it. So you could see some pitfalls coming into this zone. Why? Because not every department was ready. Not every department was ready to get exposed. They neither had the funds in order to do this particular activity. So the compendium on the citizenship told up that you need to bring in a revolution and you need to take it forward. So the government of India took this initiative in the form of CD on 14th May 2003 with the operative standards and definition coming out in public, trying to tell people how you need to get connected, what are the factors that have to be concerned about. And this was useful for the citizens to know more about the activity, the functioning of the various forms of government. With this, I come to the end of today's session. I hope and believe that all the facts and figures that have been spoken through this session would have been a great help to you, both in terms of theory as well as in the practical walk of life. In the upcoming sessions, we will be talking more about the projects of governance. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.